one way you'll see we're doing things old-fashioned today, instead of using the plastic tablecloths, the plasticized paper plates, and plastic forks and spoons that are not compostable, we're using the old-fashioned ceramic plates, and we're going to wash them. So that's one way. And then look at these paper tablecloths we can do. And I'm sure you can brainstorm. So as Christina's telling those things, she'll speak on that in a few minutes. Then we'll just take a couple minutes, 5 or something, to, as a table, talk and see how can I reduce plastics in my own life. All right, and this is Christina.
So, in order to reduce and reduce our use of plastics. According to the Center for International Environmental Law, 24 in the U.S. emit, I can't read my own writing, emit as much as CO2 as in a year as 4 million passenger cars. The group further calculates that of the production and use of plastic, if the production and use of plastic continues to grow at its current rate, by 2030, the industry will generate as much greenhouse gas as per year as 205 coal burning plants. By 2030, and that will more than double to 615 coal plants. Plastic production is accelerating so feverishly that the industry emissions will take from coal by 2030. According to the advocacy group Beyond Plastics. Toxic chemicals in plastic. These include endocrine disruptors, chemicals by which are linked to infertility, obesity, diabetes, prostate or breast cancer, among other things, among other health conditions. Linked to additives included in reproductive growth and cognitive impairment and neurodevelopment disorders. There are 5 ways plastics harm the environment. They kill ocean life, they kill wildlife, they take up space, they produce chemical pollution, and they produce microplastics. So we need to get rid of plastics.
Okay, thank you, Christina. I forgot to tell you who I am, if you don't know. I'm Carol Engelhardt and the current chair of Faith and Justice. So we decided to have this dinner so that we could find out what the climate justice and equity plans were for the city and state with our partners, Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, Joshua Lewis, here, and MN 350, how do I pronounce your last name? Hornberg, okay. So they're going to speak in just a minute. What I want us to do now is, with your tablecloths and crayons, brainstorm and come up with ways that you can personally reduce plastics and come up with ways that maybe we compost at our church. Maybe we're using a reusable water bottle, we pack bags in a car. So let's take a few minutes to do that. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for doing this little activity. And let's keep brainstorming as a church on how we can reduce our use of plastic for the very reason Christine was mentioning. So now we're going to introduce our speakers, and they will talk with us about the topic. Thank you. Josh, if you could give a little history of how you came to Minneapolis and what you're doing too, okay? All right.
Good afternoon, beautiful people. I'm so thrilled that all of you are dedicated to this movement, to be here today. I'm here with my 4-year-old daughter, Maraki, and she is a joy. She loves the church. She loves being in and around the church and having fun. It's all imagery and a culture and a community that she enjoys and relishes, and I'm really grateful for that. And I wanted to give a little bit of a backstory of myself and also to introduce our main speaker of today, Abby. But just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm the great-grandson of Reverend Woodson Lewis of the church baptized in fire, Little Mount Zion, down in Greene County, Alabama, and the grandson and raised by prophetess and minister Daisy Lewis. And I was really fortunate and blessed to grow up in a community of intergenerational love and values and protection and nourishment and nurturing and a dedication to one another and the community that is around us in Northeast Ohio, right outside of Cleveland. I came to Minneapolis in 2017, right after Donald Trump was elected president, right after he came into office as president, into I think 2 of the coldest weeks in the history that I've experienced. I think the average temperature was negative 15 degrees, and I was doing organizing for the labor unions, the AFL-CIO, working on working class, issue-based citizen organizing, really drumming up support from not just the unions, but the rest of the state, our greater Twin Cities areas, on things such as raising minimum wage and making sure everyone is able to have access to see a doctor when they need to, and that they're not choosing between paying for their medication or paying for their groceries or paying their rent, that they're able to do those things. And that passion and my spirituality led me into working for MNIPL, which some of you might be familiar with, where we get to really embrace more spiritual conviction that we all have within ourselves, and that metaphysical underpinning as to why do we get up every day? Why do we decide to do anything at all? And in the Bible, right, and I'll preface this statement by saying whether you come here today out of curiosity or you come today out of anxiety for the climate and worry, I pray that everyone here leaves today with a fulfilling motivation and a call out of the urgency of love to be stewards of the earth and of one another, right? As Jesus said, worry not for tomorrow, but let tomorrow worry for itself, right? Nevertheless, it also says in Genesis to go out and be stewards of the garden, right? To be stewards of the earth. And it is something that we should be doing and moving forward with out of love and compassion and conviction, out of the blessing and the treasure that we have here today, and the blessing and the treasure that we want our descendants to have tomorrow. And information is power, right? When we add that to the power of love, we can create the change in the kingdom and in the world that we want to see, that we want to be revealed, right? That is already there but we want to make sure is revealed and is safeguarded and protected. And this is what Abby is going to be talking about today. And perspective is key, right? We have global plans that are analyzing ice sheets and temperatures and the weather. We have national plans, we have state plans, and we also have city plans, right? We talked a little bit about our own individual plans when it comes to how can we individually make changes to reduce plastic. And there's been a lot of work done by the folks at MN350 and also at the Blue-Green Alliance where Abby works at. And Abby's also the captain of the Ward 10 organizing team and has been an architect in developing the plans for finance equity when it comes to a lot of the money that's going to be coming into Minneapolis to make sure that it's being spent in a way that is going to ensure that we're building wealth and lifting up all the parts of our community that need it. And without further ado, I want to thank you all for coming here, for being here. And I want to introduce our main speaker of today who's going to be talking about the city plan in Minneapolis, the Minneapolis People, Climate, and Equity Plan, and how we can all take part in making sure that we're doing our due diligence and that also as a city that our leadership is doing its due diligence and has that motivation to move forward out of the urgency of love. But thank you.
Thank you, Joshua, for that wonderful level setting and reasoning of why we're all here today. Like he said, I'm Abby Hornberger. I use she or they pronouns. In my day job, I'm the Minnesota policy organizer for the Blue-Green Alliance, but I also, in my free time, co-lead the Ward 10 team of the People's Climate and Equity Plan. All that to say that I know a lot about the state level policy, the federal level policy, and our city level policy that we're trying to pass that will all fund really important what I would call pre-measures to getting us to an electrified system. I think there's a lot of things, you mentioned to me on the phone, people are wondering how are we supposed to increase our electricity load in order to do this, decarbonization and this carbon neutrality. There's a lot of work that we have to do before we actually electrify everything, and so I think that's something that the People's Climate and Equity Plan is trying to accomplish, and our state leaders are thinking a lot about. A little bit more about me. I consider myself part of the youth still. I've been a climate activist since I was about 16 years old and kind of grew up with the knowledge that I've watched my environment change. I've watched the place that I call home vastly change throughout my lifetime, and I've watched, state government take the side of corporations time and time again, and I think that it's really important to be thinking about how to instill change in more than one way with every tactic possible, through politics, through civil disobedience, through lots of other things. So that's a little bit about me. I'm from Chicago originally. I moved to Minneapolis about 5 years ago to go to the U. Graduated from the U about 2 years ago. It's nice to know about the people who are speaking to you, so just wanted to give some background before we get started. The People's Climate and Equity Plan is a policy that MN350 is trying to get passed at the city level. What it would do is create a dedicated fund separate from the general fund based on a tax on big corporations that would then fund really important residential home energy upgrades, like I was saying. So that's the gist of it. So when you're wondering what would a People's Climate and Equity Plan look like for Minneapolis, a lot of our infrastructure is crumbling. A lot of us live in homes and in buildings. We spend about, I think, 80% of our time inside buildings every day. And so that obviously has a large impact on our health, about, our happiness, and about just trying to make our spaces most comfortable, most sustainable as possible. So as you can see on the left, that's kind of what I would call classic Minneapolis infrastructure today, and we're trying to re-envision this into a space where there's more greenery, where there's more mixed use buildings and housing, and a place where people want to hang out on the outside of buildings as well as on the inside of buildings. So you can kind of see what we're envisioning, and also bringing people in along the way through good quality jobs that help build up economic stability for people who have been left out of our economic system for a really long time. So we can continue to make our economic system more just in the process, which I think is really, really important. So the goals of the People's Climate Equity Plan, and sorry, I'm going to turn this way so I can look at the slides. We want to guarantee a comfortable, affordable, and carbon-free buildings, like I was saying, one that keeps our health in mind and keeps the planet in mind as well, because as Joshua was saying, like, those two things are extremely tied together, and we want to think really carefully about that. As I was saying, you know, build community wealth, make sure that the new energy systems that we're creating are not owned by mega corporations, are owned by communities, and are governed by communities that have the autonomy to make decisions about where their energy is coming from and who's benefiting from those energy systems. Yeah, and then obviously accessibility is big too. I think a lot of people think about clean energy as just for people who have the money to put solar panels on their house, and that shouldn't be the case. You know, we need to be thinking about how to bring clean energy to people who aren't thinking that climate change is the most important thing in their lives, because a lot of people are, as you know, like living very survival based and don't necessarily, climate change doesn't rise to the top of their priorities list a lot of the time. So we need to think about how to bring clean energy to those people in a easy and accessible way. And also in a money feasible way. I can't think of a better word to say that, but it's got to be comparable, right? We don't want to be increasing the cost for people just to have clean energy in their homes and in their businesses. And as I was saying, like, we need this to be a dedicated fund, separate from any other fund, separate from federal investments that are on the way to our state, separate from the city general fund. Like, we really need this to be completely standalone funding. So part of the inspiration for the People's Climate Equity Plan comes from the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which was a very similar statewide policy that was put in place. It was a 1% surcharge for corporations with over $1 billion in annual national retail sales and around 500,000 in Portland retail sales. So like I was saying, this is like a tax for corporations. And also in Minnesota, we have some of the most amount of corporations than any other state, because back in the early 2000s, there was a law passed that got them tax cuts if they corporate headquarters were here. So we have a lot of like really big companies. Target, you know, I could go on and on. I don't know all of them, but I'm sure you do. So this is like an opportunity for us to be asking the corporations that have businesses here, have a lot of staff here, to be putting money back into the community. So this is just kind of where they got the idea, and a case study that they've followed pretty closely in terms of creating the policy. And you can see just the coalition, the really diverse coalition that was part of passing that. Sierra Club 350, they had some indigenous representation, and then communities of color represented as well. So in Minnesota, we also have a very diverse stakeholder group that is engaged with steering the policy and the campaign as a whole. COPAL is part of it, Take Action, UNIDOS, as you can see, MNIPL, Isaiah, Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate, Black Visions, Community Power. So there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of experts working on this, and something to be really proud of. It's just like the vast amount of people who are working to get this passed. Sorry, a second, I'm getting me over a cold here, so I just need to. So they're kind of in the works right now for really nailing down the exact wording of the policy that would be introduced. As you also know, we're on a city council election year coming up too, so this is a really big point of opportunity for us to be asking city council members who currently hold office to commit to voting yes on the People's Climate and Equity Plan resolution next year. And then also for newer candidates, this is something that we can be pushing them on and asking them, if you were to be elected, would this be something that you vote yes on? Some of the more moderate, I would say, city council people have kind of given us like, yeah, we would support that, but like, how's it going to affect my businesses in my ward? And so while most of them voice some support, I think that when it comes down to a real vote, I mean, their seat is on the line, so they probably tell us that they're more supportive than I think that they actually will be when this vote comes to their table. But yeah, this is a resolution that, you know, they're working to perfect right now. I don't know how much everyone here knows about the state of the climate emergency. Can I, like, does anyone want to, like, raise of hands for, like, I know about it, but, like, not that much? Raise hands. Give you the bad news? Oh, that's great. Okay, well, as I started my speech with, I've grown up in a space where I just know this is an emergency. And so I did not put these slides together, so I don't know what this is. But in my mind, we need to get to net zero as fast as possible. Like 2050 isn't soon enough, in my opinion. 2040, you know, we just passed the 100% law that was by 100% clean energy by 2040, and I really applaud us for that. Really proud to have worked on it. But in my mind, like the way that I just like to think about it, like we have 10 years. We have 10 years to completely change and transform our economic and energy systems. Because after that, I mean, there's really no way to estimate like how fast climate change will happen, how soon we'll be seeing those impacts, but we do know that we're already seeing the impacts. We're having one of the wettest winters in Minnesota that I think that we've had since I've lived here. And that's not saying all that much because I've only lived here for 5 years, but it's happening now. And so there, in my mind, like there is no debating, you know, should we not? We are seeing the effects of climate change today, and we really have 10 years to do everything we can to reverse the impacts or just mitigate them as much as possible. Yeah, so another thing that's important to mention is that the city of Minneapolis is in the process of creating its climate action plan right now and finalizing its 2040 comprehensive plan. And so we really see that the PCAP could fit really well into these two city planning guiding documents that will exist. So, you know, that's a really good sign for us, and we're trying really hard to get the city to see this as something that they can integrate into those plans. And then, as I've mentioned, the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act are going to be bringing a lot of money into the state, and our state government is also piggybacking off of those federal legislatures right now and trying to amplify the funding that already exists from the feds. But we do need dedicated city funding separate from those federal and state investments, because Minneapolis is one of the largest cities in our state, right, the Twin Cities, and we have some of the most racial, economic, and environmental disparities here. And so it would really allow us to kind of hone in on the neighborhood level and get some of these clean energy projects done. So that's, if you take anything away from today, we need separate funding, not part of the general fund, in a dedicated fund for the PCAP. So yeah, this is where the People's Climate Equity Plan comes in. We're trying to make sure that all buildings get the efficiency that they need by 2030. I think that also what PCAP is trying to accomplish is get some of these decarbonization technologies implemented on a large scale. So not just by house, but like district energy systems, like network geothermal in the ground that isn't up to each individual property owner to implement these things. So that also leaves us open for really good opportunities for contract aggregation, better chances of union labor being used, which would, you know, maximize the quality of the work and make sure that this work is long-term work. So we're thinking about, energy microgrids on the small scale, but also on the large scale so that this doesn't fall on individual property owners. And then also part of the PCAP is prioritizing low-income BIPOC neighborhoods who have been left out for a long time and making sure that the funds go to those communities most. I'm thinking like North Minneapolis, East Phillips, some of those communities would be prioritized in using these funds. Yep, we want to make sure that every building is comfortable, affordable, and carbon-free. Like I was saying about network geothermal, ground source heat pumps, air source heat pumps. These things are really, really great technologies, but they're really expensive for any one person or even a church or a business to undertake all by themselves. So we want to make sure that it's easy as possible for people to access these technologies. Yeah, and I think I've mentioned this before, but just this is an opportunity to kind of correct and make our economic system more just, employ people who are previously incarcerated or have been kind of kept out of economic opportunity in the past. If we're able to do these more large-scale projects, there's a better chance of us using union labor. I want to be clear that in the policy it's not written in there that we have to use union labor, and I think that's caveat that I want to, put in there as someone who works for the Blue-Green Alliance. And then supporting contractors of color. We have some really great training programs, Jamez Staples program, Renewable Energy Partners, the work that Solar Bear is doing. Those things can really be leveraged to employ people of color. And then another thing that the PCAP focuses on is expanding public transit, right? Like we need to be able to get around in a timely, efficient, reliable manner without using our cars. And so obviously that takes a lot of investment as well. So that would just be another thing that the fund contributes to, helps reduce air pollution and get people where they need to go in a more carbon-free manner. And then want to be focusing on environmental justice, like I said, prioritizing communities that experience a high burden of pollution and air pollution and soil pollution and water pollution, and then focusing on resilience and adaptation plans so that communities are put first and have what they need as we experience some of these unpredictable climate impacts. So yeah, in summary, we want a dedicated yearly fund for climate and environmental justice, want to have community governance and oversight. This is something that worked really well in Portland, and then have spending priorities for disadvantaged communities, and then making sure that we protect worker safety by having that contract aggregation, union contracts, and then pathways for unions and communities of color. So all of that, and I'll open it up to questions if you have questions after this, but right now we're asking people to get involved by signing our petition to the mayor. Like I said, he's been like, yeah, I'm supportive, but we don't really think that he would vote yes on it. And so we don't think that he would. And also, in order to trump him, we need a supermajority because he's now Mr. Strong Mayor. So we need a supermajority in order to overcome his no vote. So I brought that with me today, and I'll be walking it around, and you can feel free to sign it if you please. And then also, caucuses are coming up for city council, like I said. So, and that's a really easy way also. You don't have to go sit in an auditorium for 12 hours. This year, it's all by a non-attendee form, so you can really just fill out this form, which is easy. Then there will be conventions, which will be held in person, the DFL convention, but caucusing is super easy this year, so I can get you information on that as well afterwards. And then, yeah, this is telling you the non-attendee for wards 1 through 10. If you live in this ward like I do, we are using a non-attendee form. We are in Ward 10 right now. Aisha Chugtai is our council member in this ward. She's amazing. She's been helping with us in a really collaborative way to make sure that all our bases are covered with this policy. And we want to keep her. She's a strong climate champion. And she's running unopposed right now. So it's looking good, but nobody ever runs unopposed. So, and then if you live in wards 12 and 13, they are having in-person caucuses on March 14th. And then MN 350 is hosting caucus training. So if you were like, I don't even know what a caucus is, it's where you get together and like everybody talks about the most important things to them, and then they vote on an endorsement for the DFL. So they're hosting a training this Monday at 6:30 p.m. via Zoom, and then there's a delegate training. A delegate is for the convention, which is like later on, which will be in person, and then that is next Sunday at 7:30 p.m. And I will be, like I said, walking around these resources afterwards. So yeah, that's a pretty high-level overview of a People's Climate Equity Plan. I'll open it up for questions, and then I do want to talk a little bit about what's going on at the state legislature this year and what they're hoping to pass, which would be a super big help to getting this done as well. So yeah, I'm going to stop talking now, and let me know if you have any questions.
Is there anything similar in St. Paul?
No. No, there's not. Yes, the question was, is there anything similar in St. Paul currently? And I said, no, there's not. But maybe after this passes, we'll be like on our way to having that be a thing. And I know there's a pretty strong 350 St. Paul base. So, but yeah, this is just a Minneapolis policy right now, or proposed policy. Well, yeah, her question was, how are we looking with minerals? And do we have enough minerals for the solar panels and the electric buses? She does not want mining in the boundary waters, which I understand completely. And I think here's where my work hat probably comes on a little bit here. But we need every little bit of rare earth metals that this earth can provide. That's just a matter of fact. If we want to have a clean energy transition, we need every bit of metal possible. So that means the aluminum cans that we all use, we need to start collecting and recycling and harnessing those, but we do also need nickel that Minnesota has in the state and some of those other rare earth metals. So if we're relying on those metals from other countries around the world, they have a lot less environmental and labor standards attached in other countries. And so those metals are being harvested in a way that doesn't serve people and it doesn't serve the environment. And it's usually like just an open pit mine where there are like children like just mining in an open pit. And if we were to do it in the United States, that would not be the case, and we would have stronger labor protections and environmental protections. So that's my long-winded answer. But we need every bit of metal that the earth can offer us, and we need to do it in a responsible way. But no, we don't currently have all the metal that we need.
How much of that can we get from recycling?
I don't have like a numerical number on that, but from like what's already out in the economy, I don't think that would meet our clean energy needs.
Yeah. We had a lot of people out of town this Sunday that weren't able to come.
Yeah.
And some of the things they voiced to me is, I'm afraid it would be priced out of the city if the landlords have to put solar panels or more insulation or more improvements to the buildings. So what can be done, or what is the plan that people can still afford their rent or their house or their condo?
Yeah, so her question was about people being afraid of being priced out of the city or not being able to pay for those home energy upgrades. That's kind of what the PCAP is designed to relieve. Like, they aren't responsible for, the landlord should not, like under this, would not be passing on the cost of solar panels to their residents because there's a dedicated fund that helps them do that without having to think about raising the prices. Does that make sense? I don't know if that adequately, gets at it. And then I think some people also might worry that the corporations that are now being asked to pay into the tax would then raise prices of goods and things like that, which is why we need more corporate accountability laws. But anyway, I think that, corporations are multi-million-dollar businesses, and we need to think about how we can protect consumers from just price gouging because they have to pay more taxes for clean energy. But in terms of rent, this should not have an impact on the price of rent for anyone. Yes, you saw your hand first?
Do you have an estimate yet on how much the city of Minneapolis will need every year to have that separate and dedicated fund? Do you have any estimates how large that fund should be to finance the People's
Yeah, the question was about like how much money does the city of Minneapolis need annually to get the clean energy projects done, I think. I don't have like a number for you, but I do know that the PCAP, it staggers the amount of taxes per use of like natural gas and coal for those things. So over time, if a company or a corporation is doing what they're supposed to do and decarbonizing their energy sources, then I'm not doing a good job explaining this. Let me back up. The fund will get more strict over time. So if people are not decarbonizing, the fund will grow. So that's the answer I have for you. I don't think that there's really an estimate of like how much it would cost, because a lot of it, we have so much crumbling infrastructure, and there's pre-work that needs to be done for this stuff to be implemented. There's transmission line work that needs to be implemented. I think it's really hard until we actually do it to know how much it's going to cost. But that's why it's important. Like, there's other funding streams to take advantage of besides just a city dedicated fund, like the state, the federal money. But I can look into it and see if I can find a better answer for you. You had a question?
I'm convening a caucus, my caucus in 12 and 13 in person.
Okay, yeah.
I assume all of them, and we have a contested race, all of them, there's no resolution process this year. People are expecting that. But it's, you should be able to ask, the candidates will be floating through your caucus if you're in person, and I assume they'll be available for the virtual caucuses for questions. They're going to want it. So that's an opportunity to ask the question about this plan.
Yeah, so her point was that there won't be any resolutions being voted on during the caucuses this year, but there will be opportunities for questions for candidates, and that is where the opportunity lies. And I think that's a really good point. Like, if you're thinking about going to caucus, you should put your little big girl boots on and be like, these city leaders, they're just people. We don't have to be afraid of them. Like, I can ask them a hard-hitting question about where they stand on the People's Climate Equity Plan. And yeah, I don't even remember who's the candidate, or who's the chair? Andrew Johnson.
I don't know 13, but there's 4 candidates for that seat. So my
Yeah.
question was, I know there's a question up there, but is for what net zero means there will still be some carbon use. Not everybody's going to be able to convert everything to electricity, right? We have lots of residential natural gas. All our homes are heated with natural gas, or most of us, if we're older stock. So is there a game? Does the game plan new construction convert where we can? How do you come up with enough change and enough conversion, with this mix of what we're stuck with as legacy systems and new opportunities, geothermal and other.
Yeah, so the comment was about net zero not meaning that we won't have any emissions, which is true. But how do we think about new construction versus existing infrastructure that can't be electrified or things like that? Like I was saying, there's a lot of pre-work that needs to be done for existing buildings, like electric panel upgrades, which increases the capacity of your electricity load so that you can have more things on your system. And I think for new buildings, there's a lot moving at the state legislature about that, about commercial building codes, the energy codes for new buildings, and updating the standards on that. For public buildings, for private buildings, and for state-owned buildings. So I think that's kind of, what the PCAP is trying to do is think about the things that aren't so easy, which is, people who live in residential rental properties that is owned by a large management company who doesn't want to do anything that's not especially necessary for them. Yeah, which I have experienced so many times. Can I get a this? Can I get a that? And they're like, is it necessary? No, it's going to cost us money. So it's assisting them so that they're kind of being forced to do those upgrades that cost a lot of money. Does that answer your question fully? I don't know if it did.
You know, I guess this will unfold, but technically how we get to enough advantage with the changes you're talking about to kind of offset what we're stuck with. I mean, I'm thinking about my radiator heat, you know, most of our homes in Minneapolis, I think, are radiator heat, that kind of gas fireplace. Sorry, I do.
Yeah.
You know, but I got solar panels on my roof, so I'm thinking there's some trade-off.
Yeah, like she was saying like there's radiators and baseboard floor heating that like we're not going to get rid of those things. They're like deeply ingrained in the structure of the house. Like, yes, this is true. But we can like think about like the energy that your radiator uses should be electric. And natural gas, that's a whole nother thing, you know. That's a whole nother can of worms that I don't know all that much about. But there's things like air source heat pumps, you know, that help move and cool air in a more electric efficient way. And then you can use less of your radiator. We don't have to take the radiator out, but it just doesn't need to be used as often.
And our buses can be electric.
Yes.
Our transportation system can be electrified.
Yes, we do need to electrify our transportation system. Stat. Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of, like same thing with geothermal. Like this, I mean, the pipe trades have been installing HVAC systems forever. It's not a new technology to them, right? And so are heat pumps. Those are not new technologies. They're being used in a different way than they used to be. But a lot of this, like, emerging technology isn't new technology. It's just like thinking about how to use it in a different way. So that's good for reliability too. All the state, you know, people saying this is a blackout bill at the legislature. It's not. We're gonna have like reliable energy systems. Hope no one's scared about that. Yeah. Did anyone else? You have a question?
So I understand it. It seems when you're talking to the city council folks and the mayor, people that would think would normally be allies for your cause, if there's pushback, do you think that's because they don't see it as economically viable, or is it logistically not viable in their view? And then, like, my opinion is, like, you know, if you see major change, it's usually from the top, either subsidization or you're penalizing. So if they don't do it, you penalize, you subsidize people that do. Is that kind of what this does?
Yeah, so it's a two-part question. The first question about like opponents or not strong supporters of the PCAP short for People's Climate Equity Plan. Like what, is it an economic or a logistical feasibility opposition? And I think it's mostly economic. They're worried about how the businesses in their ward are going to be able to pay for this or not. And that's like why, like the Portland example, like it's not just every business. It's not your local mom and pop shop on the corner that owns one shop and they're barely struggling to stay by. Sorry? You're welcome. It's not going to apply to you, hopefully. You know what I mean? Like it's for the bigger corporations that have multiple properties that have a ton of revenue every year, right? So like we don't want this to negatively, and I think that's one thing that we can be voicing to the city council members who are questioning the economic feasibility is, yeah, it's not meant to like burden small businesses or things like that.
You know, our pastor said thank you because he has some very famous small Irish bar
Oh,
on that corner that you should try out.
which, Prodigal Pub is your pub?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Very good. We love the Prodigal Pub. Okay. You have a question?
I don't know if you have the answer to this, but I've been getting text messages and emails from Freeman asking people to fight Cop City. And then I would also like to know what you feel about what's happening in the Phillips neighborhood, right in the middle of Little Earth.
Are you just wondering what I personally think about those two issues?
What do you think is going to be the outcome in the Phillips neighborhood?
I guess, okay, I understand the Phillips question. I'm still, like, what do you want to know about the whole Atlanta situation?
Both of them are very impactful to our environment.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I have lots of thoughts on both of those things. So yeah, I'll talk about East Phillips first. If you don't know, the city wants to demolish the Roof Depot building, and they have a contractor to do that. And it could be happening like within the next couple weeks, and the building is intoxicated with arsenic. Like there's arsenic underneath the building, and so there are literal homes right next to this building, and it is the most overburdened community in all of the state currently. What I do know is that people are fighting it from every avenue possible. Like I was saying, people are showing up to the city council meetings, being thrown out of city council meetings when they're executing their First Amendment right to be there, and they're ending city council meetings and then reconvening when nobody is there, which is just, in my opinion, like infringement on First Amendment rights. And then people are also planning for civil disobedience around that. I mean, there was a whole camp set up, and the police. Yeah, 2 people. Yeah, the 2 indigenous matriarch leaders who were leading that camp were arrested and cited and dropped in the middle of who knows where, Minneapolis, and just so yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people really gearing up for defending the depot stat. And if you want to follow Defend the Depot on Instagram, they are disseminating all the information about what you can do to support there. And I also just like. This Atlanta thing is really, really horrible what's going on. They are trying to clear cut the entire Walani forest, which is the largest forest in Atlanta, so that they can build a police training center so that police in the United States can learn how to handle civil disobedience and just protesters, and they will be trained by the IDF, the Israeli police, and yeah. I mean, it's happening, and they murdered someone in January, and it was found in an autopsy that he had his hands up when they shot him 13 times and killed him. So there's been consistent weeks of action. There was a vigil, there was a ceremony this morning for Tortuguita, and if you can at all defend to the Atlanta Solidarity Fund, that is a really great way to support the people who are on the ground and literally facing police brutality every single day for being on public lands. We don't have any public spaces in this country anymore. Like, people cannot just like congregate, and that's a problem. And so there's a lot going on there. Yes, it's being funded by corporations. Yep, and the Georgia State Police have been untruthful about the situation. So if you don't know about it, yeah, I would really suggest Unicorn Riot has some information. They're like a independent news source that covers these type of situations. So that one's really upsetting, and I would encourage you to learn more about those 2 very important environmental justice issues. Yeah.
Plan that was just passed. How do they interact with each other? How do they dovetail? Is it that the PCAP helps prepare us for that? Is that kind of the sense I was getting for you? In order for us to get 100% energy, we don't just need more renewables, and we also need to retrofit buildings in order to get there.
Yeah, I would say like the 100% energy law is more so like from a utility perspective, like. You know what I mean? Like saying that the utility has to decarbonize, and less about like individual residences. So I would say that this one is more community centered and more like serving citizens but using corporational tax to fund that for people that can't afford it currently. And then the 100% law is more so about setting standards for the utilities by 2040.
Abby, if we want, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
If we want to just stay informed, because
Yeah.
some of us here that don't have deep knowledge, we're not going to go out and protest or be high activists, but we want to find out what's going on so that we can contact our council person or mayor or whatever for this. How do we get on the MN350 or MNIPL email list, or is there a way on
Yeah.
the sites to do that?
Yeah, so if you go to MN350's website, you can find the People's Climate Equity Plan landing page there, and then at the bottom there's a sign up for email updates, and then Ula is the campaign manager, and she sends out updates. And then if you live in a ward where you want to be involved with the ward teams, and the purpose of those is to be in coordination with the city council person and to do base building. So if you want to help with those kind of things, I can help connect you to your ward lead. I'm a co-lead, so I have someone else that helps me in this ward, thankfully, because I have a full-time job and I can't do it all alone. But yes, so you can get help. You can help by talking to your neighbors about the People's Climate Equity Plan and making sure that they know about it, and you know, learning about it yourself, and just helping to spread the word, I think. But yeah, in terms of like updates, the website has an email sign up. Does anyone have like, yeah?
What sort of motivation would a corporation have to stay in Minnesota with that? Like, what motivation do they have?
Maybe showing that they're an ethical and sustainable business that has no problem with supporting the community. I mean,
Sure, but you know, I'm the devil's advocate. I mean, like, they can also say, well, I give millions and millions, this, and this. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's difficult to, like, find out, like, okay, I mean, in 5 years, I mean, Target's already moved out of downtown. So, I mean, who knows what everybody else is going to go to. I just wonder if there is, because we're putting so much on that business, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, they also get, you know, $10 million bonuses and you know, and pay their people a terrible wage. So it's like, is there, other than doing the right thing, is there something else that is, I mean.
well, I don't think there's no, like, you know, like you were saying, there's no incentives. There's no, like, if you do this, then you get a bonus or something. But if they do, like, decarbonize their natural gas and, you know, their energy system, then they won't be taxed as much. So it's not like they're, like, let's say this Target is somehow net zero. They won't be charged this tax anymore in Minneapolis. So it's not like it's like.
It's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question, and I don't have like a business background, so I guess I can't really say too much more about it. But, you know, it's not like they're going to be taxed for the indefinite future, and they have an opportunity to, you know, yeah. But I think it is like a good point, you know, like corporations, if they don't want to do it, they'll just up and move. So, yeah, I think that's an area where if you have ideas, bring them to the coalition, and they'll consider it, I'm sure. So, yeah, in the back.
Recommendations for how people who don't live in Minneapolis can involve work. I'm in Ridgefield.
Question was about if you don't live in Minneapolis, how can you plug in and support? I think you can still call city council people and call the mayor. You can call the mayor. You can call the mayor. Your church is here. So you are a patron of Minneapolis, you know? Yeah. You can say, like, I am you can call Aisha and, you can sign the petition. Anyone can sign the petition and contact the mayor, you know? And I think you have a good point. Like, if you spend time in Minneapolis, you are a stakeholder. You are someone that they should be, you know, listening to their voice. So you could call Aisha. You could call the mayor. Those are the 2 ways, I would say.
Thank you so much for coming. We can stay and visit and ask questions.
Yeah, I'll hang out for a little bit.
That for those that have children, that at 1 o'clock we're supposed to go pick them up.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me.
It was very informative, so we're very thankful to Abby and Joshua for coming and giving us new information that I didn't really know about. I kept getting these emails because I'm on M350 and MNIPL, and so that's why I invited them, because I didn't know what I was supposed to contact my council person and mayor about. So thank you.